I would like to ask what the extra strength homeopathy actually refers to. Why such a title for the book? And is it about using much higher potencies? Oh, that is a good question.
It's about using different potentizations. It's about applying the principles that Hahnemann developed early in the 19th century already and perfected throughout his lifetime, applied those to the modern situation. That means the different causes of chronic disorders. Um, in the early part of the 19th century, the main cause of chronic disorders, according to Hahnemann, and this is pretty much confirmed by conventional medicine too, was chronic infections. And he called those miasms. Today's chronic disorders are in part caused by toxins, poisons that are in our environment and in our food and in our water. Second, they're caused by medical treatment. I don't know if you know that conventional medical treatment in the United States, and I don't know about Canada, but I assume it's similar, and in Europe, most industrialized societies, medical treatment is the #1 cause of death. Did you know that?
Yes,
Um,
unfortunately.
Recently, Dr. Peter Kroche, he's a Danish scientist who was in part the person who started the Cochrane Foundation. He was a co-founder of that organization, the research organization. He came out in 2013 and said medicine is the third cause of death. And this year, he published its #1 cause of death with
Oh,
882,000 deaths due to medical treatment and prescription drugs. So we think we're safe in conventional medicine. We're not. In fact, it is pretty much a death sentence in some cases.
I want everyone to know that the first part of your book, you come in with the chemical and heavy metal poisonings that we are subjected to and how they affect our mental and emotional well-being directly. So we're not all mentally ill, we're poisoned and we can't think. And I think that's where we are right now.
And there's one other thing. Homeopathy traditionally in the 19th century was practiced with a so-called, what I call the horse and buggy method, the wait and watch method, and that was appropriate for chronic infectious diseases that eventually were latent at first and eventually turned into chronic problems. You had 20 years, 30 years, 40 years sometimes to try to catch these diseases and reverse them in chronic. But the fact is, homeopathy wasn't practiced that way. It was practiced primarily as a single dose approach. And that's based largely on the 4th edition of the Organon. Hahnemann had advocated that originally. And Kent, James Tyler Kent, was one of the homeopaths in the United States, prominent homeopath. He used what is now known as the constitutional approach. That means give a remedy for the patient. Well, Hahnemann never did that. You could say there was an alteration of the original. Hahnemann didn't give a remedy for the patient except in acute disorders. He did say, with regard to acute disorders, that one does need to take into consideration the state of mind of the patient. So an anxious patient needs aconite. Perhaps a patient with a high fever who has no anxiety is belladonna. I mean, there are many different considerations here, but the book makes the point that today we're in a very different situation. We're no longer just treating the chronic outcome of infections, such as the syphilitic infection they treated often in the 19th, or the gonorrhea infection. Today, we do have more very complex in part iatrogenic causes, where people have been medicated for years on one medications with prescription drugs, and it's changed their entire health. And those are the people we see in real life. They come on our door and they've tried everything, and they have tried classical homeopathy usually too. And that's basically they get one remedy and they waited and watched, and they never got any better. In many cases, they got worse. So those things we need to take into consideration as homeopath, and that's what I go into in my lectures in this book.